Welcome back to another episode of MMORPG Tycoon 2. We are going to be doing another episode. This one is going to be focusing on all of the classes. So I hope you guys enjoy. Might as well get some popcorn. This is going to be a long talking, explaining kind of video and have fun. So the first class we're going to be going over is the Wizard. I haven't really changed much. He has his little battle armor, his battle mage armor with the green eyes and all that. He's the elven character for the things, for the players. But each one I've tried to go in and I've wanted to buff the HP like you see. So like the paladin, I try to put out like 25 HP, and you'll see in the monsters that I try to buff them up to about 15 depending on what they are. So I've tried to go for higher HP values along with higher mana values, just so there's like more things happening during combat and all that, and there's just more things you can do. I'll probably increase the speed to about 6 for all of them, and then more or less depending on, like 6 is probably gonna be the default speed is what I'm probably gonna have to do. But that is not the main thing that we're doing this video over. We are doing this video is mainly going to be about the entire skill tree, which I took a bit to kind of flush out depending on how I want each class to really function. So each class has a basic strike. So these strikes are just going to be 1 second cooldown melee range with instant cast. And they are going to be doing just 1 damage, just basic 1 damage. So like the damage can't get any lower than this, but it also won't get any higher than this basically. Basically it's there to set the ground flooring for damaging moves going forward, just as a nice little kind of thing. We've got the floors to flavor text in the FX if you guys want to see what those things are, and we'll move on to the next one. So the second starting ability we have for the Wizard is Magic Missile. So this spell is supposed to be like, shoots 3 magic missiles at targets, dealing 2.8 damage. Does a little bit of damage each one. So there isn't really a FX to be able to have it do missiles and then have 3 individual missiles go out for this attack, which I think would be pretty cool to have 3 little missiles, but that's all right. Maybe it's something that they could add in for when you're playing as a character rather than the AI using it, because it might be a little bit laggy. But then we have, of course, the mechanics. So this one will use 3 mana, basically 1 mana for each missile is what I was kind of thinking of, and I put it at 2.8 damage because apparently the spell was really overpowered, so I had to nerf it a bit during the player testing. Alright, so the next one we have is Ice Burst. It's supposed to be like a burst of icy wind that just goes from like your hand when you cast a spell. So the description here is a burst of icy wind that goes at a target, dealing 2 damage and slowing the target as well for 3 seconds. So I did put this one at 3 mana because I am nerfing the damage by 1. I don't know exactly how powerful them being slow really is, so I just decided to do 1 extra mana for having 3 seconds of slow, that kind of conversion, with 1 mana of course for every damage. It is a 4-second cooldown with a 1-second cast, so it is going to be a little bit to cast. I can't just immediately use it. And of course this is the FX we got here, the attack with ice and a strike pattern with the blue. So the next one we have here is the Acid Burst. It's supposed to basically be just, you know, a burst of acid from your hand, of course. A burst of acid dealing 4 damage over 8 seconds and increasing all damage dealt to the target by 10% for 4 seconds. So it's kind of like the Acid Burst does a lot of damage, and it also is kind of melting your armor. So I do have this at 4 mana, 1 mana for each damage over time but the damage over time is over 8 seconds. I probably will end up nerfing that damage over time. That seems a bit much. Or actually, you know, I'm just going to go to nerf that weaken to 5%. I feel like that sounds a bit better because I feel like it's a bit strong, but it does have a 1-second cooldown with an instant cast. I don't think I applied that correctly at all. Okay, so I fixed it. It is 10-second cooldown with a 1-second cast. I'll hit apply this time. Next up we have Shatter. So the FX for this one is just a cast with a light straight path because it's just basically a shatter spell, the blue color. The flavor, of course, is breaking their defenses, draining 3 mana and draining 3 rage. So basically it's just supposed to be like a 1 mana. It's just to shatter them, like their defenses a bit, but not really their defenses. It's more of like breaking their mana, or it's basically just a drain spell is what it really is, which doesn't make much sense for Shatter, but I think that's how it is in D&D, because I was basing all these class stuff off of a lot of D&D spells and whatnot, so that's where a lot of the inspiration for the spells came from. But this is just 1 mana, and it will drain either 3 mana or 3 rage, because I mean my player classes are going to most likely be just either mana or just rage, so I had to do it like that, especially with the enemies are most likely just going to be mana or rage. So this is really just a 3 mana or a 3 rage drain type spell, and I want it to be versatile. So yeah, I think it's relatively balanced. It has 10-second cooldown with a 1-second cast, so they really can't cast this all the time. It's like they cast it once every 10 seconds if they have the mana to cast this over a lot of the other great spells coming up. So the next one we have here is Lightning Bolt. It is a long-range bolt of lightning dealing 3 damage. So it's just a long-range bolt spell. It's not really, it doesn't have anything special. It doesn't do any stun or anything like that. But the mechanics, as you can see, is just 2 mana and 3 damage. There's a 3-second cooldown and a half a second cast with sniper range. Followed by the counter spell. This one is a very unique one. I have no idea how I need to balance this. I feel like I should reduce the mana, but I don't know how powerful it is, so I want to keep it like that. It has a 10-second cooldown, and it's just instantly happens no matter what, and it will give anyone they want on the team, essentially, 100% protection for a whole second. So this could be used in a very powerful way. It can stop any insta-kill attacks, etc. I feel like it is very strong, so it has to be 8 mana, but I don't know if the AI is going to value it that way. So we will find out. It is just a cast straight line with the light archetyped with a blue color. So the next one we have is Ice Storm. It does have a low DPS of 0.2, but that's mainly because it is more of like a slowing type ability. It erupts on the target, dealing area damage, and the damage as long as anything is in the zone. So it's like an AoE. It's supposed to be an AoE zone, but there's not really an AoE type thing in the game just yet. So I just basically did it to one target, and that one target deals 8 damage over 8 seconds. So 1 damage every second, and also slows them for 8 seconds. So you can see the stats here: 8 mana, 8 damage over 8 seconds, of course, and 8 seconds slow. With this one has a 30-second cooldown because I thought it was a bit more of a kind of half ultimate, if you will. Has missile range and 3-second cast. I hope they do add in another in between missile and melee range type thing. I think that would be cool, especially for the burst type spells. Next spell we have here is a very interesting one that I thought this spell was pretty cool because it's supposed to be a dream spell. So like you touch them right with your hand and it will put them to sleep with mind magic, essentially. It's 10-second cooldown, 0.5 second to cast, so it is a very fast one. It costs 4 mana and only does 2 seconds of stun. I feel like that might be underpowered, but that's how I'm gonna have it for now. If anything, I might just increase the stun duration, or maybe just reduce the mana cost, but we will find out how the AI treats that. And the type is just like pink because it's dream magic with light effect, straight in cast. All right, so the next one we have is Viltrolic Spear. So it's basically like a spear of acid. It does decent DPS with total damage of 8. So this one is a doozy, all right. So the description is excruciating damage, melting the target, dealing 4 damage and dealing 4 damage over 5 seconds. So it has more of like, because it's acid, so it has like a lingering acidic effect. I thought the water effect looked good with the ballistic type in green. The mechanics we have here is this takes 2 whole seconds to cast, missile range, 10-second cooldown with 7 mana cost, 4 damage, and then 4 damage over 5 seconds. Actually, I think because it has 2-second cast, I'm actually going to move that down to 6 mana. I don't know how the AI is going to trigger that, but that's what we're going to do for now. All right, so the next one we have here is Contact the Other Plane. The FX doesn't really matter because it is a self-use ability, so you won't really see this. But basically, it allows you to contact a higher being to gain power, restoring 10 mana over 10 seconds. And this is kind of like their ultimate, is what I was kind of thinking of it as, or really like it helps them utilize their other spells more. So they're not really blocked after using a certain amount of spells, and they can keep casting by using this once in a fight, essentially. And it is just instant. It's just boom, it happens, and they just start generating mana. I think it's really insane. So this next one I thought is another like half ult. It is a 30-second cooldown, sniper range with a 2-second cast. This is supposed to be like a chain lightning thing. It was 7 mana and it deals 9 whole damage, which could be very ridiculous for boss fights because there's not really a chain implemented into the game, so it's more of like just 9 single target damage. Again, I wish there was more options that you can do to manipulate this stuff, but basically the description is lightning. That I need to change that. So the description is lightning chains onto multiple enemies, dealing 9 whole damage. The animation attack is just electric with a straight path with blue, because I thought blue lightning would be complementary to the kind of thing, because there's a blue aura with white in the middle, which that kind of looks like it has. But without further ado, we'll move on to another class. All right, and just before we move on to the other class, I just wanted to kind of explain what I was trying to get out of these. So one thing you'll notice is I tried to go for evolution type things. So Ice Burst evolves into Ice Storm, and Acid Burst evolves into Voltric Spear, where Lightning Bolt will evolve into the Chain Lightning, kind of giving everything basically giving my main evos an evolve, whereas the Magic Missile is kind of like a one-off. It's a unique ability, not really something that evolves. It's already very powerful on its own. Then you have Shatter, which kind of evolves into Contact the Other Plane. sort of. Not really. I wasn't really thinking of it that way, but we basically have something that makes them debuffed. Then we have something that protects us, and then we have something that makes them stop doing what they're doing. And we also have something that allows us to keep doing what we want to do. So I feel like they're a very versatile class that might be a little bit overpowered. All right, so the next class that we have here is the fighter class based off D&D again as well. And this one I have put at 20 base HP and 10 rage. I'll see how I want to change that depending on going forward on how it's viewed for demands, for buffs and nerfs, depending on what the AI thinks. The DPS is pretty high so far. So of course we have the strike ability, which is just for every class, and then next for their first real starting ability is sweeping blow. So this one's description is swing at the target's legs, causing them to stagger, dealing 1.5 damage and slowing the target for 2 seconds. So it's kind of like you're sweeping at their legs, you know, doing a sweeping blow to really kind of stun them. And the mechanics I have here is it utilizes 1 rage, 1.5 damage, and slows for 2. So I might have to increase that rage cost, but I don't really know. It is more just like an extra attack for them to do. So their first unique ability is parry. So this one is basically just like a parry. It's perfectly deflect their attack, and it generates 2 rage. So it's just basically it's a way for them to easily just generate rage as a 1 second cooldown, and it's just an insta cast. I wish it would be more of a thing where you can do an effect where it happens when you're hit rather than when you just want to cast it. I think that would be a cool little thing to do, because you can't really change that at all anywhere. But without further ado, we'll get on to the next one. So their next attack that they can do is called Action Surge. So it's basically a ability that allows them to attack a second time quickly, dealing 2 damage. So what I did here is I just took the strike ability, which is 1 damage, and I made it do 2 damage but 1 rage for each of the damage. I think it should make that 1 rage instead of 2 rage. I don't know how well that's gonna work, because I think it's 1 rage for the extra damage that it does deal for the Action Surge. But it has a 5 second cooldown, melee range, and instant cast, and the FX, of course, is that color. So next one I tried to do was a dueling stance. So it basically acts as a fighter buff, and with the dueling stance is what it's called. I don't really know, like I couldn't really find a stance type emblem, so that's the one I decided to use. But basically it allows them to getting into stance, causing 4 rage to generate over 8 seconds. So it's basically just they get into stance, and while as long as they're in the stance, they generate some rage. It's just basically I'm giving the fighter a lot of chances to generate rage to use their other abilities. Of course, being the fighter, they're a master of all weapons, so I decided to give them a crossbow for a ranged attack. It doesn't do a lot. It is just a mini crossbow, essentially, is what it really is. But it deals 2 damage, and they can do this every 5 seconds at missile range. So it's just a nice way of them getting their first range attack. It's essentially how I'm doing this one. Of course, the FX is this one, just a little metal bolt going at them. So the next one I'm doing is Vital Blow. So this one allows them to just kind of get a Vital Blow. It's just another way for them to utilize their melee ranged hits. Essentially basically it's like me trying to give them ways that they're training to be able to understand more combat techniques, essentially. So the description is stab target's vital point, dealing 1 damage and 3 damage over 3 seconds, because it's a Vital Blow. So it's going to do 1 damage up front, but it's also going to be doing some lingering damage. I decided 1 rage for each damage because it's a pretty strong one, I think, because it's 4 seconds, and then it just does 4 damage, and they're going to be getting a lot of good rage generation, so I decided to up the rage for these better moves. So the next one is another kind of, it's basically making the crossbow do its utility, which is what I wanted the crossbow to really be for the fighter. I didn't want the crossbow to really do any damage. That's more for the ranger class. So the fighter here has a dazing shot, which utilizes 4 rage, and it allows them to be stunned for 4 whole seconds, which I thought is very powerful. But it does have a 10-second cooldown, so they can't be infinitely stunned by this. And it has a 5-second cast as well. So at best, this is going to be on a 10.5 second cast loop, which I think is very balanced for other classes. And the FX, I decided to go for a kind of yellow type thing, kind of like a stunning type shot, I guess. Anyways, we'll get on to the next one. So here we have triple attack. So this one allows them to strike the target 3 times in an instant, dealing 6 damage, which I think is insane. So I made the rage requirement 8. I will probably end up nerfing this because I have done a lot of broken things for other classes, which you'll see. But basically, it's them swinging 3 times in an instant, just like boom, 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 like those cool anime fights you see. This is a triple attack. This is exactly what you got here. It's awesome. All right, so the next one we have is Indomitable. So this is kind of like a second stance. You unlock it later on, because this isn't really supposed to be a defensive type build, but basically this allows you to go into a defensive stance where it reduces all damage dealt by a target target by 15%. So basically you get to protect yourself and you take 15% less damage for 10 entire seconds. And this has a 60-second cooldown, so they can't really use it more than once in a fight. If it's a boss fight, maybe, but I don't see a boss fight lasting more than 45 seconds, depending on how they do it in the Dungeons update. The FX, I have just like a paint kind of lightning bolt. If there is any effect, I have no clue. All right, so the next utility I got for the crossbow is disarming shot. So this is basically a shot from the crossbow that temporarily disarms and hits for a moderate damage, doing 2 damage and slowing the target for 3 seconds. So this is basically, I wanted it to do some kind of damage because I didn't want it to just be straight slow, because I feel like just having slow isn't very powerful in an ability. At least I don't know if it's very powerful, so I decided to kind of compensate and do 2 damage and of course 3 seconds for the 1 extra rage that it costs. I might end up buffing or nerfing this, we'll find out. So this class is like a real special, real good ability. They don't unlock until 20, so this is Aura Blade. So they can use this every second. It has a 0.5-second cast. It utilizes 3 rage and does 4 damage. So like every 1.5 seconds they can deal 4 damage. This is a very powerful one. I might end up nerfing it by 1 damage. We'll find out. But like I'm trying to make this a bit balanced by the fact that it uses so much rage for every swing, and it is of course a blue swing. So for this class I have unique abilities, I would say. So the strike kind of evolves into action surge, which then evolves into triple attack. So you do 1 attack, and you can do 2 attack, and then you can do 3 attacks. And I think that was a good little thing. And of course we have sweeping blow and vital blow, which is kind of good. I think having the sweeping blow that kind of disables them evolve into a vital blow, which does a lot of damage, I thought was a cool little thing. Which then of course well, I'd say the strike mainly evolves from the action surge triple attack and then evolves into Aura Blade. So it's kind of like taking your basic attack all the way up to Aura Blade in this class, I would presume. So with this class I would have preferred that they could have picked between Dueling Stance and Indomitable, but this is just how we're gonna have to do it. So then it's that. Of course they have a unique ability called Parry, which I thought was a very cool thing to add. Just give them a little bit of pizzazz. Of course we got the crossbow, which then gets their normal bolt evolved into the dazing shot, and then of course the disarming shot as well. The paladin I have 25 HP, which is a lot, and I don't even consider him really to be a tank. Well, I guess he is kind of the tank class, but not really. He also has 10 mana and 5 base speed, and his DPS is 1.7. Of course I don't know what they're gonna think, because I think he had a massive buff. He starts out weak but gets strong. It's basically what he is. So his basic strike, of course, dealing 1.2 damage, I think is what that is, because I might remove that later on, because I don't really know if I want that to be 1.2. But his first major ability is Lay on Hands. So Lay on Hands is basically just their first healing ability. You heal an ally for moderate health, healing 5 damage. So basically it's 5 mana for 5 HP. I think is really good, because they're not really supposed to be healer, but of course they have a healing ability. This is a melee ranged ability. They have to be touching the ally to heal them. So of course it's a Lay on Hands ability. You're using your hands to heal them, so you can't exactly do it from 10 feet away. But it does have a 10-second cooldown, so they also can't really spam this to get a bunch of health instantly. And of course it has a little green physical thing, just in case it has an ability for a melee. I don't really know if it will pop up, but it probably will. So Divine Sense here, we have sense the mana around you and absorb it. So it's kind of basically allowing the paladin to generate a very small amount over 6 seconds. I didn't want it to be huge. I might end up buffing this, I don't know, but I really didn't want this to be huge, since it is just boom, instant cast. They gain some passive mana and they can do it every 10 seconds. So I thought that was pretty nice. Divine Aura Blade is another, basically it's their first upgraded attack. So it basically allows them to coat their blade in aura, dealing 3 damage. Well, Divine Aura, I should say in the description. But basically this is just upgraded normal attack. So they can do it every second, just like the normal attack, and it's an instant cast. But this one takes 1.5 mana and it deals 3 damage. Of course it is a golden attack. So this is when they start getting their first damaging spells. This one I thought was pretty cool. It is Branding Smite is their first one. It allows them to brand the target with a divine mark, dealing 1 damage and dealing 2.5 damage over 4 seconds. So basically it deals some damage up front, and then it deals a lot of lingering, well, not a lot of lingering, it does a very small amount of lingering damage for 3.5 mana. And it of course has 5 seconds. It can be done at missile range and has a 1-second cast. So their first defensive ability is Protection from Evil. It allows them to infuse a target with divine mana protecting them, increasing all damage dealt to a target by 30%. No, it's decreasing all damage dealt. I will fix that later. But this is a 30-second cooldown. with a missile range in 1 second, because it's basically like they can use it on themselves, or they can also use it on an ally to protect them instantly for a small amount. Wait, I have this wrong. This is not supposed to be weaken. This is supposed to be protect. 1 second. All right, so they get a 30% protection for 8 seconds, and they only cost them 4 mana. So it is a pretty cheap protection spell, pretty fast is what it is. Of course, you got the golden sky beam. All right, next we have is blinding smites. This one has a flash divine mana on a target, dealing 1 damage and stunning it for 2 seconds. So it's basically like a flashbang going off is what this is, but it's like a flash of light, you know, like a sky beam right on the target. And I thought it was a pretty cool one. So yeah, 1 damage for 2 seconds of stun, and it has a 5-second cooldown, so it can be used pretty often with a 0.5-second cast, and it should be 3 mana to cast, I think. There we go. So the next one we have is immediately another smite spell. I might switch them around because I feel like I want to have the smite be down here. Actually, I will do that. There we go. So that way, yeah. So the next one is actually Divine Aura Slash. So this one is basically you slash a target releasing aura from your blade, and it deals 3 damage. So it's 3 mana for 3 damage. Because it is a ranged one. It's one of their very few ranged spells. I think it's their only ranged spell. Yes, their only ranged spell that they have access to. So it is kind of expensive for the damage it does. And it has a 1-second cooldown. So they can spam this if they really want to as they run in. But it is going to burn up their mana very fast. Of course, it is just a straight yellow beam. Now we have Staggering Smite. So this is another smite spell, which is a force of divine mana that prevents movement, rooting the target in place for 6 seconds. So they can still attack if they have ranged attacks, but they're not going to be able to move. Like, they're stuck there for 6 seconds. And it does have a 10-second cooldown, so they can't be looped infinitely in the root in place, but it is going to be a very effective one. But it also has a 1-second cast. The Aura of Life is another healing spell that the Paladins have. So this allows them to heal a target and grant regeneration. It has healing of 3 immediately and 10 heal over 10 seconds with a 30-second cooldown. It only costs 6 mana. I'm going to buff that up to 7 mana. And it has a 1-second cast, but it has to be done in a melee range. So, it has to get close for this to be able to apply. I might change that to missile, actually. Yeah, I decided to change that to missile, and of course, it is a sky beam like an aura of life. Next we have is another smite. So this is the 4th smite spell that this class has, and it is Banishing Smite. It's a destructive divine mana that disintegrates target, dealing 8 damage. So this one is a huge damage spell. It has a cooldown of 30 seconds, missile range, a 1-second cast, and it costs 8 mana, and it deals 8 damage. So for each mana you have, you can deal 1 damage, essentially, is what this does. It's basically a burst spell, which eats up a lot of mana. Next up is Divine Aura Pierce. This is basically another aura sword ability. It pierces through the target's armor, dealing 4 damage. So it deals 4 damage for a cost of 2 mana and has a 2-second cooldown. So they can't spam this one like they can the other one, but it is an instant cast one, and it does have a straight with light. I think since the mana is relatively low, I might make that 0.5 actually, but we'll see how the AI takes that. All right, so moving up in the lineup here, we have the Strike, which evolves into the Divine Aura Blade, which then goes to the Divine Slash, which then also unlocks another move that you can do with the Aura Blade, which is Divine Pierce. Then we have Lay on Hands, which kind of evolves into Aura of Life, is how I was kind of picturing that. And then you have Protection from Evil, which is just kind of there. It's a good one. And then they have 4 variations of Smite. They have Branding Smite, which deals damage over time, which they also have Blinding Smite, which kind of stuns the target. Then they have Staggering, which makes them unable to move, kind of like Gravity Magic. And then of course we have Banishing Smite, which will basically insta-kill lower tier mobs, but not really kill the higher tiers and wastes all your mana, is essentially how I viewed that spell. Warlock currently has 16 HP and 15 base mana with an average DPS of 1.4, which is currently at A tier, which is what I kind of want them all to be at. So I'm getting there on the rankings. Of course, they have the Strike, but their first spell that on the list is Fireball. Hurl a ball of fire at a target, dealing 1 damage and 2 damage over 2 seconds, and it only costs 4 mana. It is a ranged mana ability, and it does cost 1 second to cast with a 3-second cooldown, and the FX is, of course, just a straight path of a fire. So you hex the target weakening it, increasing all damage dealt by 30% for 8 seconds, and then I gave it a straight path with the dark and purple effect. Mechanics, of course, costs 3 mana for 30% weaken for 8 seconds. Hold Person is a thing where they conjure a hand, which that hand holds the target in place, rooting them for 2 seconds. So it is a very small hold, but it only costs 1 mana. It's super cheap, and you get a 2-second hold, and you can only use this every 10 seconds and with a 0.5-second cast. So you basically need to use it pretty quickly. It's very efficient, and it doesn't cost a lot. Shadow Blade is really their first melee type ability. This one allows them to just spend 1 mana to deal 2 damage. So it's basically like upgrading their basic strike into something else for the cost of mana, but it does have a 2-second cooldown, so they can't just spam this because, well, they're not a close range build, but it does give them a viable close range attack with a cost on it for the Warlock. And the FX, of course, is a black dark type effect because it's a Shadow Blade. Vampiric Touch is basically this is their siphon ability. So this allows them to absorb a target's vitality for 3 health. So they just get to spend 2 mana to get 3 HP. I don't know. I think I should probably increase this up to 3 mana actually. So it's like, because you're dealing 3 damage and gaining 3 health. So I feel like it should be a conversion that's equal at least. And they can do this as another melee ability. So it's kind of better than the Shadow Blade, but it doesn't deal as much damage as the Shadow Blade, but you do get more lasting effects. This does cost 5 seconds. Well, it takes 5 seconds to be able to use it again, so you can't spam it as much as the Shadow Blade as well. But it does have an instant cast at melee range. So the Warlock also has a counter spell ability. This one allows them to not stab the target. I will correct that, don't you worry. But basically, that's also wrong as well. This is fantastic. Oh my gosh. But this is correct. It does cost 8 mana and has a 100% prot for 1 second with a 10-second cooldown and an insta cast. So it's basically just you stop that, it doesn't do anything for an entire second. And that's that. Alright, so Blight is basically a cloud of poison that you just kind of like shoot at your target and it deals 6 damage over 4 seconds. So it's a damage over time. It does require, however, 1 HP and 4 mana. So the Warlock does have to spend some HP in order to use this. So it might end up being that I buff this by maybe removing a mana from it, but we'll find out how the AI takes that one. You can only use this every 4 seconds, and it does have a 1-second cast. Next up, we have Hold Monsters. This one allows them to ensnare a target, then make them unable to do anything, which allows them to be stunned for 3 seconds, and it costs 2 mana. So it's a bit better than the other one. The other one just roots them in place, but this one actually stuns them for 3 seconds, which I think is a nice little upgrade. And it does have a 10-second cooldown with a 0.5-second cast. Sickening Radiance. So this one is basically where you radiate a wave of disease, dealing 5 damage over 8 seconds and slowing the target for 8 seconds. So this is kind of a big spell, I would say. It costs 1 health again and 4 mana, and it deals 5 damage over 8 seconds and slows them for 8 seconds. So basically it deals 1 less damage than the Hold Monster, or it deals 1 less damage than Blight, but this one does have slow. So it's basically like, do you want it to do more damage, or do you want to also have a slowing effect, is where I was going with that. But there is a big key difference, and that is Sickening Radiance is it's kind of radiates from you, which means this is also a melee ranged move that costs 2-second cast time. So it is kind of big, which means I might end up buffing this and nerfing Blight, or I might keep Blight as it is and end up buffing Sickening Radiance to have maybe range. But I was kind of wanting to keep this as another melee thing, because it's kind of like you radiate this from your body. But we'll move on to the next one. Contact Other Plane. This is where you contact a higher beam to grant you power for 10 mana over 10 seconds. So basically it's just a nice little charge. So it gives them abilities so they can keep proccing their other abilities with this ability once, of course, they get to level 18. So it is an in-game ability. But this does have a 60-second cooldown, so they really can't use it very often, and it has a 2-second cast as well. So it does keep you from doing things for a decent bit while you try and gain more mana over 10 seconds. So it's kind of balanced in my opinion. And it is a self-use, but that's what the effect I think will use if it is indeed like have something when you self-use. And Assure of Flames. This is basically a column of flame that deals 10 damage. So this one is very interesting. This one is just 10 mana, 10 damage. It is just basically a nuke. It kills small things, but burns you out of a lot of mana for bigger things. So it's really good for small creatures, but maybe not necessarily as good for big creatures unless you give them a weaken first and then you use this weapon. So I think this was a really cool ult for them to have, especially since it is basically an evolution of Fireball. Then we have a Hex, which kind of evolves into Vampiric Touch in a way, I think. Not really though. Then we have Hold Person, which evolves into Hold Monster. Of course, Shadow Blade, I tried to kind of evolve into Sickening Radiance, so they get kind of another spell, but really I think it's more of like Vampiric Touch to Blight into Sickening Radiance, something like that. And of course, I do get the unique counter spell, which well, it's not really unique. I just wanted both my sorcerer classes. So basically my wizard and my warlock are the only 2 classes that have access to counter spell. So it kind of gives them them a little bit like a special unique card that the other classes don't have. So the next one we have here is Cleric, and apparently the AI really loves this class, which I think I might want to have it run for a bit to see if that's truly like it is. So I haven't really run the game since I did all these changes. I kind of just put it in pause and then added all these new moves and changed things around. So we'll see if that stays at S tier. But currently they have a very good start. So they have access to the strike, which is 1 damage, and they immediately have also access to the overhead swing. And the overhead swing allows them to do a basic attack essentially for 2 damage, but it does have a 2-second cooldown with a 0.5-second cast. So I thought this was pretty balanced, but I think the AI thinks it's busted. So I don't know. See what you guys think, but the thing is just a physical light thing, just a nice little overhead attack. Next up, we have Protection from Evil. So this just basically gives a target divine mana protecting them, reducing all damage dealt by 30% for 10 seconds. So it's basically a nice little protection for a decently long time. And the mechanics right there, it costs 8 mana and it gives them a 30% prot for 10 seconds at a 1-second cast time and a 30-second cooldown. Spiritual Weapon is their first kind of unique type weapon that they have access to. So this allows them to summon a divine hammer to strike down your foes, doing 2 damage and stunning the target for 2 seconds. So it costs 5 mana. So I think that's where it's kind of balanced, is it does cost quite a bit of mana. Like they can only use this spell 3 times and then they're completely out of mana. Because I was trying to make it so like they can use the spell, but it's not really something that they want to use, because the cleric is mainly there for activating the prots or giving things health or even buffing. That's kind of their main thing. It's not necessarily doing damage, but they do get a stun ability, so that way they can stun to kind of help support, is what I was thinking by this. So at level 6, they'll get their first healing spell, which we have here is Aid. This allows you to give an ally or yourself aid to alleviate the wounds while healing 5 damage over 5 seconds. So this is kind of like a heal over time. You're giving them aid. It's not like an immediate effect, but it does cost 4 mana and it does do 5 health over 5 seconds. So it is a nice little thing. And if you're paying attention, you'll know that this basically is 1 less mana than Lay on Hands, which the Paladin has access to, because I'm trying to make this have better healing spells, but we'll see how the AI takes it. Next, we have a buff type spell. This is Beacon of Hope. This creates supposed to create an AoE that replenishes nearby allies, but it doesn't really have an AoE ability because we don't really have it in the game yet. So basically what I did is I just made it so it gives it to 1 target, and it only costs 2 mana, and you can give 1 target 4 mana or 4 rage, and you can only do it every 10 seconds with a 0.5-second cast. This might end up being nerfed. We will see, because I know the AI doesn't really like things like this too much. It kind of tends to make it be busted, but whenever it's not an even trade is what I'm referring to. Meld into Stone is a debuff type, which basically allows it to, well, I don't know why it's labeled as debuff. Oh, that's why it's labeled as debuff. So basically it allows you to hurl your fist at target, rooting them in place for 10 seconds. That's not true. The flavor did not save again, which I'm sure no one expected that to happen. But basically this is a self-use only, and it has a 30-second cooldown for 2 seconds. So basically what I thought of Melting the Stone is basically like, yes, you're a cleric. You're not always supposed to do damage. So what this does is allows you spend 8 of your mana to root yourself in place. So you can't move. You can still do stuff, but you cannot move. And you also get a protection of 80% for 10 seconds. So this basically allows them to just turtle if they need to tank while the party retreats or something, is what I was thinking of this. This might be kind of overpowered, or the AI might not even use it because it does have a debuff. So I have no idea how the AIs take this spell, but I don't think the AI is going to like it too much. Next up, we have Aura of Life, which is another heal spell. This allows you to heal a target as long as they stay in your aura, healing them for 15 damage over 10 seconds. So this has a 30-second cooldown and a 1-second cast time, so it does take a little bit to cast, but it does use 10 mana. So this uses basically 2/3 of their mana pool, which is a lot of mana, but it does heal 15 over 10 seconds. So this is basically a spell to try and get, it can't do a full health bar of healing, but it also might not do it. So like the Paladin has 25 health points, so this will get them 10 less health points, but because it is also a heal over time, they might not necessarily get up to full. They might stay the same because they might be taking damage while getting this healing over 10 seconds, but it is a very good ability, is what I thought it was. Even though it does say the heal per second is only 0.4, so I think the AI might think this is a bit weak, but I thought it was a pretty cool ability. Next up, we have Divine Aura Hammer, which is supposed to be a upgrade from their basic attack, so it can be used every 2 seconds. It's an instant cast, and they spend 1 mana to get 2.5 damage on a target, whereas the overhead swing is 2 damage. So if they want to, they can spend a mana for each swing and do an extra 0.5 damage, but they don't have to, and I don't know if this is going to be super strong. But the main thing that I was thinking of is, well, they can use this. This has a 2-second cooldown. So they can use overhead swing, and then they can use divine aura hammer, and they can kind of chain it back and forth every second with the 2-second cooldown. And that's how I thought that would be a nifty little ability, so they can basically have a little combo built into their class. Exclusion zones. This is a one where it's basically a trap where you trap the target in the divine circle, preventing them from moving and damaging them as well. So it does cost 7 mana, so it is a big mana sink for this. It has a 30-second cooldown, so they cannot spam this, but it does have sniper range. So I'm assuming that this one's going to be very useful in dungeons to kind of stop a certain monster from coming in while they eliminate other ones. It does have a 2-second cast though, so this does take a bit to cast. So if they do try and cast this close up, it might not go their way. It does do 4 damage over 8 seconds, so it does not have a lot of DPS at all, but it also roots the enemy in place. So if the enemy is a long-ranged enemy, which I do plan on adding at least 4 or 5 sniper ranged abilities for creatures maybe coming up, is what I was trying to do. So it does get longer ranges opened up for enemies to try and counteract with parties, is basically what I'm trying to think of. But this is a very good, just stops them from doing any kind of movement towards you and damages them as well. So it'd also be very useful for bosses, because you just keep the boss right where you want it to be instead of moving around and doing all other things. Greater Restoration is another healing spell that we have for the clerics. So this one allows you to heal a target and restore their stamina, healing 4 damage and restoring 4 mana over 8 seconds, as well as channeling or generating their mana or rage for 4 seconds. So basically, this one was kind of the upgrade from Aid. So Aid it was the Beacon of Hope. So this is an upgrade from Beacon of Hope. So Beacon of Hope just allows you to restore 4 mana or 4 rage, but this one allows you to heal 4 and charge generate 4 of their mana. A key difference though from Greater Restoration and Beacon of Hope is that Beacon of Hope can be used at long ranges, but Greater Restoration does have to be in melee range. But it only has a 0.5-second cast with a 10-second cooldown, so this can be used relatively frequently. The last one, their last ability, their ultimate that they unlock, is Forbiddance. This one allows you to create a divine circle that prevents the target from moving and draining them. So basically, this is a 10-second cooldown with a missile range, so they can use it at long ranges. It has a 2-second cast, so you can use 6 mana, which isn't huge, and you can root them in place for 4 seconds and drain their mana or rage by 4. So basically, it's you can't do this and you can't move, is basically what this spell's about. It's a really good one. I foresee this having a lot of implications for the boss, and it is kind of like a Skybeam. The next class we have here is Barbarian. So this one has a high health stat and a high rage stat. Barbarian is all about getting health and raging. I might end up decreasing the rage stat by a bit, so they can't just have a full bar of a lot of rage, but what they do is they gain rage very quickly, very fast, and they spend it just as quickly as they gain it typically. So they have their strike, and they also have an overpowered strike. So this strike allows them to spend 1 rage and deal 2 damage. So you already see implications of their first attack utilizing their rage in order to do more damage. So the more they get hit, the more damage they do. I probably am going to actually increase that to a 2-second cooldown so they can't just spam the crap out of it as a little nerf. I don't think the AI is going to see it as too much of a nerf, because that is a very powerful ability. Their third ability, oh boy, they can use this every 4 seconds. Every 4 seconds, they just generate 2 rage. There is no take away. It's just boom. Every 4 seconds, they generate 2 rage. It is very powerful. Then they move on to Reckless Attack. So this is when we start getting into attacks that use rage and their own HP in order to do more damage. So this one has 5-second cooldown, and they can spend 3 health and 1 rage in order to do 6 damage. So it does a lot of damage, but they're also hurting themselves in order to do a lot of damage. We have Sweeping Attack after that, and this one allows you to swing at the target's legs, dealing 1 damage and slowing the target for 4 seconds. So you can use 2 rage and 1 damage. It utilizes 2 rage, and you do 1 damage, and you also slow the target for 4 seconds. This one has a 2-second cooldown, so this one you can kind of chain with overpowered strike, but not as efficiently, I would say. But I'm just trying to give them abilities that they can kind of chain together. This is all about chaining attacks and doing a lot of damage, but also kind of hurting yourself in the process. Their next attack, well, not really attack, but this is their buff. They get Frenzy. So this allows them to go into a frenzy, barely being able to distinguish foe from ally, causing generate 10 rage over 10 seconds. And they can use this every 30 seconds, and it has a 1-second cast time. So they can use it basically maybe once or twice a fight, and it does take a little bit to cast, but then for the next 10 seconds, they gained 1 rage every second. So it is a very good buff in my opinion. Then we have another attack that this one uses a decent amount of rage. This one uses 4 rage to do 1 damage and 2 damage over 4 seconds. So yes, this might not be as strong as the other attacks, but if they chain this well, they can easily do a lot more damage by just using this, then using maybe overpowered or reckless attack, and then using this again. It'll be a very good, basically, chain. It'd basically be the 3rd attack for all their combos. But this does have a 3-second cooldown, so it can't just be spammed, and the damage over time is over 4 seconds anyways. I don't know if it stacks at all. So there is one weakness to a Barbarian, and then that is that this is their only ranged attack, really. This is the axe throw. It uses 1 rage to do 2 damage, so it doesn't do a lot of damage at all. It has a 3-second cooldown and a 0.5-second cast. So this attack is kind of weak, I would say, but it is their only means of a ranged attack, which I kind of like. Next, we have a double attack. So this is basically kind of upgrading the normal strike in a way. This allows them to do 2 attacks basically, but it utilizes 1 rage to do 2.5 damage. I'm actually going to make that 1.5 rage. I think that's a little bit more balanced, and I'm going to make that 4-second cooldown as well, just to make it a little more balanced. I think that was a little too strong in its pre-planned phase there, but yeah, it's a kind of a gold because I wanted it to be like a proc, you know, that looks kind of cool whenever they use it, stabbing and slashing the target. So we now have a unique one that I like, that I try to do with it. So basically you can do this only in melee range, but you grapple the target, ceasing its movement and rooting the target in place for 3 seconds. So for 3 seconds you can basically use grapple to grapple. You can basically use grapple to make them stop for 3 seconds, and it costs 2 rage to do so, but it's a 4-second cooldown, so you can't just infinitely make them stop and not be able to move. So they could potentially get away, but there is about a 1-second dead space in there. Next, they get fast movement. So basically this just allows them, basically I try to make the Barbarian be faster, but since I can't buff the individual unit to be faster, I decided to make the opponent be slow for 8 seconds, so that for every 30 seconds they can just make one target slow for 8 seconds. So I thought it was a very good ability to kind of have in to help try and give the appearance that the Barbarian is buffed. Last up, their ultimate, which is very strong in my opinion. Every 60 seconds they have a 1-second cast time, and they can use this on themselves. They basically berserk until all is eliminated, causing 2 rage to generate over time of 8 seconds, and they get 30% protection for 8 seconds. So they just become a force to reckon with. I might have to end up nerfing the protection a bit, but this ability I think is very powerful. So with this class, I have Strike, Overpowered Strike. Of course, those evolve into that, and then of course the Strike also evolves into Reckless Attack, and then we also have Sweeping Attack and Vital Blow with the Double Attack. So those are kind of your just attack line upgradables, and then we also have a unique Axe Throw along with a unique Grapple. We also have Rage, which evolves into Frenzy, and then it evolves into Mindless Rage. Of course, we have Fast Movement as their unique. The Ranger, for right now, I don't really know how I want their stats to be. I'm kind of like, how should I do the stats? But they currently have 15 mana and 15 mana. They currently have 15 health with 15 mana. Their first ability, of course, is Strike, but they also do start off immediately with the Longbow. This allows them to just straight up 2 damage. I'm going to make that 2 seconds actually, otherwise the bots are, well, the AI is probably going to complain about that being a very powerful attack. But every 2 seconds they can use their Longbow, which does still 2 damage with a 0.5 second cast. And of course, there's your animation. Next up is another unique little ability. This is a Hunter's Mark. This allows you to mark your target, buffing your next attack, dealing 4 damage over 8 seconds. And it uses 3 mana. Caltrops is a debuff. This one is a throw a bunch of Caltrops on the ground, slowing the target for the next 6 seconds. So it's just 2 mana, and you get 6 seconds of slow. Has a 10-second cooldown with a 0.5 second cast. It's just a nice little ability. Then we have Flame Arrow, which is the first unique upgrade for the Longbow. This one allows you to shoot a flame arrow at a target, doing 1 damage immediately and 3 damage over 3 seconds. This does have a 4-second cooldown with a 0.5 second cast, and that is supposed to be missile range. And this allows them to spend 4 mana for, of course, 4 damage. Then we have Steel Will. So this allows you to steal your resolve and muster more power to continue fighting. So basically it allows you to just charge 3 mana. Just boom. Every 10 seconds they just charge 3 mana. Honestly, I mean, I'm debating whether or not I want that to be charged mana over time. We'll see how the AI takes it. Next up is Lightning Arrow. So this allows you to shoot a lightning arrow at a target, stunning it, dealing 2 damage and 2 stun. So this one is also a 4 mana ability. So basically what this one allows them to do is, instead of just doing 4 damage, this allows them to do 2 damage and 2 stun for a 4-second cooldown and 0.5 second cast. Then we have Grasping Vine. Vines. So this is another trap-based one like Caltraps. This allows you to conjure vines to ensnare the target, rooting them in place for 6 seconds. This is a 1-second cast with a 10-second cooldown and 6 mana for 6-second root in place. I'm going to nerf that to 4 mana for a 6-second root in place. I think that might be more balanced. I feel like 6 seconds just stuck is not very powerful, especially since Caltraps was a 6-second slow for 2 mana, and then for an additional 2 mana you can just root them in place for 6 seconds instead. I think that's a little more balanced with a 1-second cast as well. That's the FX, just kind of vines just going down on them and whatnot. Then we have double shot. This allows them to shoot 2 arrows at a time at a target, dealing 4 damage. And for the increase of 2 damage from the longbow's basic 2 damage attack, it deals 4 damage for the cost of 2 mana for, of course, the increase of 2 damage. As they can do this every 3 seconds with an instant cast. I might end up changing that to a 0.5 second cast time. Actually, I will. And then we will see how the AI takes it after that. Stone Skin. This allows them to harden your skin like stone, reducing all damage dealt to target, well, dealt to you by 15% for 10 seconds. I might end up nerfing the seconds that this goes on, or the protect might just go down to 10 seconds. But this does cost 5 mana to do, so this is half in our mana pool in order to do Stone Skin. So I think it is kind of balanced, and it does have a 1-second cast, so they can't just immediately use this. They might take a hit before even getting this thing off. Wrath of Nature is one that I thought would be very cool to have for this class. This allows you to summon nature to fight for you in battle, which I thought was a very cool kind of thing to do. This does a lot of stuff. So this is a 30-second cooldown ability. It does takes 2 whole seconds to cast. It also takes 8 mana, so that is a majority of their mana pool. But this also does 6 damage over 8 seconds. It has 8 seconds of slow and a 20% weaken for 8 seconds. So this thing does a lot, but it is a Wrath of Nature. So the last up, of course, for their longbow evolving. Their longbow basically evolves from the longbow into the double shot, and then finally you get the arrow volley at max level. And this arrow volley is a very cool attack. This basically just shoots a volley of arrows at a target and it deals 7 damage. So it costs a lot of mana. It costs 6 mana, and you just try to do 7 damage. But it also has a 1-second cast, so you can't just do this immediately. I would say arrow volley is very good for killing small mobs, but it's not very good for killing big mobs. The Rogues. So this is a little class I tried to tweak and whatnot. I'll probably end up increasing their base health to maybe 18 or something like that, and we'll see how this goes. I don't know how I want this guy to be balanced health and mana wise either, but we'll find out as we go. I'm curious to see what you guys say in the comments. So we do have, for their first starting ability, besides strike of course, is the mini crossbow. So you can shoot a bolt at a target dealing 1.5 damage. It has a 5-second cooldown, so you cannot use this thing very often, and it is a little ranged attack for a little bit amount of damage, is what I would take it as. Next up, we have Sapping Sting. So this is another little interesting attack. So basically, you can jab at your opponent's weak point, stealing vitality. So basically, you utilize your mana in order to steal their health. So basically, this one is a 2 mana cost for 2 siphon of health, and you can do this every 4 seconds at melee range. What's the FX there is green straight. Next up is the Firebolt. So this is a upgrade to the mini crossbow. It gives you another little thing that you can do with the mini crossbow. It uses 1 mana to do 3 damage over 3 seconds. So basically it's just a flaming bolt, and it just lingers there and it just burns them for 3 seconds. Essentially is what I was thinking of it as. I didn't want to make it do damage up front because I thought it would be a little too strong for the rogue class. Next up we have Acid Blast. So this one allows them to blast from your acid blast from your fingertips towards your target, coating them in acid. And this costs 3 mana, and this will do 2 damage over 4 seconds, and it does a 30% weaken over 4 seconds. So it is very good for applying weaken, but not so much at dealing damage with just this spell alone. It does have a 10-second cooldown, so you cannot spam this. They can't constantly be weakened by this spell alone, and it does have a 1-second cast, so you also can't just immediately use it. And that's kind of how I balance its low mana cost for the damage and the weaken at the same time. Next up, we have True Strike. This allows you to strike a person's vital, doing devastating damage. So this is 8 mana for 8 damage. And it has a 30-second cooldown with an instant cast. It just happens. You just get 8 damage immediately deducted from your life total. It's just so bad. So next we have Double Strikes. This allows them to just basically, I don't know exactly if they'll use it correctly. I might end up having to change this one around, but basically it's just supposed to be another basic strike ability that they can utilize for absolutely no cost at all. So they can basically just strike at the same time. I don't really know how they'll take that. I might have to change this ability around a bit. Next is haste, and this allows you to enhance yourself with haste, increasing your speed. But I thought, like, instead of making the opponent slower, I thought for haste I'm going to make them like charge their mana faster. So this allows them to basically, if they do True Strike, they could then use this ability to get some of that mana back, so they don't just cast True Strike and maybe a Sapping Sting, and that's all they do. With this ability, they can maybe do True Strike, Sapping String, and then maybe an Acid Blast or something. So it gives them at least one more ability to do before they're completely out of mana. Hence why I gave them Double Strike and Strike, so they can kind of do that back to back, etc. And the mini crossbow bolt, of course. Then we have Poison Spray, and Poison Spray will allow them to evoke a mist of poison from your hand that quickly dissipates, and this basically costs 4 mana. It slows the target for 8 seconds, and it weakens them by 30% for 8 seconds. With a 30-second cooldown, this is in melee range, and it's an instant cast. So it is pretty devastating for this one, but it doesn't do any damage, so this is a utility-based spell. Next, we have Shocking Grasp. So this allows you to hit a target with your palm, shocking and stunning them for 2 seconds, and it costs 2 mana. This is another close range melee type ability. This allows them to just use 2 mana for a 2-second stun. So this ability is very strong and has a 4-second cooldown. So every 2 seconds you can stun them for 2 seconds. This is very powerful in my opinion and very good, especially for the rogue class. You can stun them. So like you can True Strike and then stun them and then do like 2 basic strikes right off the bat. It's so good. It's so good. Next we have is a Triple Strike. So this one is basically 3 damage, effects on target every 10 seconds. I didn't make it cost anything, so this is what I'm maybe thinking of doing is letting them to strike every second, have Double Strike happen every 5 seconds, and then have Triple Strike happen every 10 seconds. So they can do 1 damage, 2 damage, and then 3 damage is what I'm thinking of. But that might be a little too strong, so that's why I'm kind of leaving that at 1 damage to kind of see how the AI takes these abilities. Finally, we have their ultimate, which is also ridiculous. Every 60 seconds, this has a 0.5 second cast, and for 10 mana, they just do straight up 10 damage. This nukes small mobs like crazy. Like, they do this, and then they do a basic strike and another basic strike, and then they kill the spider in like 3 seconds. This is very awesome, very cool ability. For those of you that have made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you for watching. Have an excellent day, and don't forget to like and subscribe.